In our second video, just going to take a look at the 3D Studio Max user interface. So we have the Revit model imported from the first video. I'm going to go on the top of my toolbar here, right click and select Layers, and we're going to work with the Layers toolbar here. So if you've worked in AutoCAD in the past, the layers will look very similar. Here every layer that was exported out of Revit is brought in. Notice here if I go say under 3D Roof and hit that first icon, I can hide any of the objects in my viewports. So you can see in that perspective view the roof being turned on and off. So any layer at any time can be hidden. There's other ways to hide objects. You can actually right click on them and hide them also. But through the layers system, it's just an easy way to get to them. Notice here too, if I click on say the trees here in my perspective view, if I click on the tree and then go up to that layer toolbar again, and I'm going to click on the last button here, Set Current Layer to Selections Layer. So all I did there is updated my current layer setting here. Now it's 3D, L for landscape, plant beds. So because I selected that tree, that's what's showing. And I'm going to hide that tree. The Revit trees don't render very well in Max, so it's a good idea to hide those, and later we're going to add our own tree. Now I'm going to go under the Layer Manager. And here you see under each layer, when I hit the plus sign, I can see all the different objects that are inside that layer. So there's a lot of windows from Revit that were brought in, each one labeled individually. So each of those are different objects I could select, and then I could put materials on any particular window. Here I've got some suspended ceiling objects. I'm going to click on the button up here to select them in the viewport. A little difficult to see because they're underneath the roof right now. I'm going to go into my Move command. I'm just going to move those up so we can see them. So when I move an object, click on the Move icon, just move the objects up. So here are just several reflected ceiling objects from Revit. And I'm not going to need those, so I'm just going to turn that layer off also. Since I moved those temporarily, I'm just going to do an undo. So upper left corner, click on that icon to undo the movement. And then I'm going to turn that layer off. Now in my layer manager, you have a hide layer here, and I'm going to hide it there. So a slightly different icon than we had before when we weren't using the layer manager. Let's now go down under 3D equipment here and say that I wanted to select one particular piece to either change the geometry or add a material. I can just click on it here. There's this entrance beam. Again, just a specialty object from Revit. I'm going to click to select it in the viewport. And again, just another example. I can go to my Move command. The gizmo there, I'm in my perspective view. I just hovered over the Z gizmo and just moved it straight upwards. I can also click on this button here in my toolbar, Select from Scene, and it's another way to select objects. So here you can see a list of all the different objects that were imported from Revit, our doors, windows. Let's say I wanted to work with the garage door. Now this garage door from Revit has several different components to it, but by clicking on the parent, or that first garage door listing there, that's going to group all the objects together. And then I can just move it up. Again, I'm just moving it up so we can see it here. It's not something it's something I'm temporarily doing. So that's just another way to easily select objects. So I just didn't going to undo that movement that I made there. Now also notice in your viewports, I can hover my mouse kind of in the center of the viewports. The icon changes there to a series of arrows, and I can move these around. So if you wanted to resize your different viewports, you could just click on them there and move them around. If I right click after selecting that and reset the layout, it just goes back to where it's symmetrical. Every viewport is the same size. I just right clicked in my perspective view to make it the current layer. Now lower right corner, I can click on it. It toggles, it's our min-max view, toggles whatever the active view is. to full screen. So my perspective view I selected before, and just clicking on that button. Also hitting Alt-W on your keyboard will also maximize whatever viewport you're in. Other commands, I'm clicking on zoom here, again lower right corner. Click on zoom icon, basically like a magnifying lens. I can zoom in and out, and you can see some of the interior models. I can click on pan. Notice the icon changes to the hand, and then left click, I can just left click and drag and pan around. Same thing can also be done with the wheel mouse. To pan, I can hold the wheel mouse down and then pan around. Also lower right corner there, I can arc rotate, so I can spin that model around. So all these were settings in that lower right corner of our toolbars there. If you've worked in AutoCAD, this is basically the same as the 3D Orbit command in AutoCAD. And you can orientate your model around so you can see whichever way you need to view the model. Now I'm going to go under the Views toolbar here, and I'm going to save the active perspective view. So that view is just now saved temporarily. So now if I did movements or changes, let's say I right click over the label perspective there, I can change the view to a top view, front view, any of the elevation views. And I'm just panning around, zooming and panning. So by right clicking, I can just check out the views here and make it any view. If I switch back to perspective, it doesn't click me back to that perspective view I had before. So that's why I had saved it. So now I'm going to restore the active perspective view, and that just restores it back to where it was before. Other settings, if I right click again over that perspective label, we're in smooth and highlights now. If I click on wireframe, it changes my view to wireframe, which is what the default setting was on the other views. Click that back to smooth and highlights. And edged views I can turn on and off. So F3, if I hit the function key 3, it let me do the switching to toggle mode and shaded mode. F4 is your shortcut to put the edged faces on. Or I can right click over that perspective view and turn them on and off also. And just one last thing to remember, under my layers here, I'm going to change the layer off of that current layer there. That layer was turned off. So if I had added objects, they would not have shown on the screen. So it's just a good habit. I went back and changed that to the 0 default layer. Now if I'm working with objects, typically you're going to add a layer and then add an object, but just a good habit to get into to switch off of a layer that's turned off. And that'll do it for this video.